This is my favorite Emanuel, just so you know. I know all the fucking Emanuels, and they're a
I
lot.
tell my brothers that all the time.
Yes, exactly. Hi, everyone. Today I'm talking to Dr. Zeke Emanuel, my favorite Emanuel. He's also one of the architects of the Affordable Care Act. You're welcome from Zeke. I wanted to talk to Zeke about his new book, Eat Your Ice Cream, which offers more practical advice on eating and living well that cuts through the flood of dubious wellness content, of which there is much. Spoiler alert, he doesn't think eating more beef tallow is the solution to a healthier life, and it's not. Please do not listen to RFK Jr. on this topic. This interview was recorded live at the Politics and Prose bookstore in Washington, D.C., so let's get to it. Zeke, it's great to be with you here at Politics and Prose in Washington, D.C. to talk about your new book, Eat Your Ice Cream, 6 Simple Rules for a Long and Happy Life.
Yes.
So let's get started. One of the main theses of your book is that life is not a competition to live the longest, although that is the obsession with much of the tech industry, which is news to these Silicon Valley CEOs. A lot of them are obsessed with achieving immortality, whether through lots of different means, including downloading their brains to various things. Clearly, a lot of people want to live the longest. So in a world full of wellness advice, what is your point? Why should people listen to you?
Well, first of all, it's common sense. But here's the problem with all of that stuff. There are multiple problems. One is it makes wellness and living a long time an obsession. And it's the wrong obsession. Just living a long time isn't a fulfilling life. The question is, why do you want to live a long time? What's in it for you? About 6 months ago, I was at a dinner, and yes, one of those brothers sat me next to Brian Johnson, who some of you will know is a guy who wants to live to 150. And I said, why do you want to live to 150? What's the point of your living to 150? Silence. And then he turned to someone and says, I'm the most monitored human ever. Well, that's not an answer to the question of why, right? The whole point of living a long and healthy life is because we have other things to do. We have a why to our lives. And living a long time is not it's not a fulfilling part. And so it struck me that they were replacing, right, the means to a good life and making that the end. And that's always a mistake, as my ethics professors will, you don't need a lot of fancy logic to know that's the wrong thing to do.
Right. I mean, what do you think the motivation? Because they think they're the finest people in the land, I believe.
They can't imagine the world without themselves in it. And look, I got the lowest passing score in psychiatry rotation at Harvard Med School my year. Okay, so don't listen to me when it comes to
He did say Harvard Med School, but go ahead.
Didn't come to psychiatry, right? But here's this is a hypothesis, unproven. There's something deeply unfulfilling to them. Maybe they have imposter syndrome. They got rich because they just happened to be lucky. They were at the right place at the right time. Whatever it is, right? And they're trying to find fulfillment, and living a long time is the substitute for finding why they're doing what they're doing and what it is. And I think that there are many of them who are doing great things. But I think if you want to live a long time, right, and there's a title of a book, I'm sure it's here, that's, something like you have to know why you'll die to live a long time.
Which was Steve Jobs' idea.
By one of the civil rights people. And it seems to me that's the right answer. That's really important. What are you willing to die for? That is so important to your life that you're willing to die for it. That'll give your life meaning. And I have a feeling there's nothing that these guys would die for. Anyway, that's a hypothesis. I have no idea. And as I say, I'm just terrible at psychology and psychiatry.
But it has sort of infected the society at large, this idea of wellness. It's been driven by these platforms. There's influencers everywhere. Talk a little bit about that, because there's so much nonsense, like in gobbledygook and just codswallop.
So if we're all inundated, whether we read the paper, get newsletters, whatever. And it turns out that even if you're on any of these platforms, right? You get this stuff whether you want it or not. It's something like 90% of people have gotten wellness or longevity stuff even when they don't actually look for it. But one of the things that struck me in doing this is there's both too much and too little. It's simplistic. Now, the too much, and almost all these books pick them up and they make things so complicated. You have to do this routine in this way, or this is the number of minutes, or exactly this number of grams of protein you have to eat. I had a little tweeting battle with the HHS yesterday, and they listed. I objected to one of their recommendations, and they listed in ground beef all the micronutrients that you get from ground beef, the selenium, the magnesium. It's like, yeah, you don't have to really worry about that if you eat a healthy diet. You don't have to count on each one of those things. So it's way too complicated. Since we've talked about Peter Attia, I can say, page 269, I believe, of his book, grilled into my head. He has himself squatting and talking about the bad form of his squat. Now, do you think if he got the right form, it will make hell or beans worth a difference to the longevity, the wellness, or the meaning of his life? I can assure you, no.
Right. No squatting.
Well, no, squatting's good, but if you got the form a little wrong, it's not really going to make a difference to get it exactly right, unless you happen to be going for the Olympics of squats.
Right. And then, my friend, but one of the issues.
The other thing is it's a little too simplistic. So if you pick up these books, they're either mainly about exercise with a little sleep and nutrition, mainly about nutrition with a little exercise and sleep. But that's it. It's sleep, nutrition, and exercise. And that's just way too simplistic. And one of the important things of my book, I think, is, saying, look, it's what we're doing here. It's social relationships, interacting with other people. That is the single most important thing you can do for wellness, longevity, and happiness. And all the rest of this stuff is secondary. Mm-hmm. And they the wellness industrial complex totally underplays.
Flips the script. One of the things, since I've been doing this reporting for so long, it is actually, everyone's like, what is the secret then? I go, I have to tell you, there's eating is good, not eating badly, sleeping well, exercise fine, and I said, but not living near a cancer collection, like an Elon Musk data center, which look that up. But one of the things they said, the two things, if I have to say after all this year of reporting, is don't be poor. Because the longevity numbers are coming down rather significantly for people below a certain in poverty, and have friends and family. All the scientific statistical stuff is all around, and you always want causation, not just correlation. There really are study after study showing that. So let's get to the book because it's organized around 6 rules, essentially. The first is don't be a schmuck, which you divide to avoid self-destructive risks. You list smoking, alcohol, tanning, avoiding vaccines, avoiding cancer screenings, and owning a gun as the 6 top schmuck moves. Interestingly, I don't know which one to go first. Interesting enough, you include weed under smoking. The country's been moving towards marijuana legalization for many years now. Explain the various schmuckitudes. What stack rank them.
Well, smoking we don't have to explain, and yes, vaping may be better, but it is as someone says, no free lunch. There's lots of issues with getting addicted to nicotine and whether you actually then go on to smoke cigarettes. It does help some people quit, but there are plenty of other issues with it. From my standpoint, there are a lot of things we should avoid. The gun one is interesting. It was based upon following 18 million people in California. Mm-hmm. And looking at, wanting a gun if there's some violence in your neighborhood, very, very understandable, I think. But it turns out having a gun in your house dramatically increases your risk of dying by gun violence. Yeah. And it also dramatically increases the risk of any child dying by gun violence because About half of the guns are stored loaded and stored accessible in the, night table drawer, in the dresser drawer where kids can get a hold of them. And then it just turns out that you're much more prone to violence, right? You don't get killed by the stranger coming into the neighborhood a lot, but a relative or a friend, that's actually a lot.
So that's sort of the Chekhov's gun.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you take neighbors, one who owns a gun and one who doesn't, the one who owns the gun, twice as likely to die.
Okay.
But my real, the sort of discovery here, I was thinking as I was writing this chapter, what's the schmuckiest thing out there? And I thought, gotta be base jumping. Where you put the Michelin squirrel suit on, you jump off a mountain, there's wind, and you don't control anything. There's no parachute, no nothing, right? That's got to be really the stupidest thing you can do. Turns out, not true. That chance of dying from, squirrel jumping is 1 in 2,700. Getting injured is about 1 in 250, but dying is 1 in 2,700. Turns out, spending $100,000 to be a tourist and climb Mount Everest is schmuckier than base jumping, right? It turns out that the risks for all comers, including expert climbers, Sherpas, and all the rest, 1 in 100 chance of dying, right? And by the way, your body doesn't come down. It's frozen up there, and no one is going to spend any oxygen bringing you down. Also turns out if you're over 59, I just scanning the audience here, our chances 1 in 25. Now, what could be stupider than to make a lot of money, be 65 and say, I'm going to celebrate, go up Mount Everest? Well,
it's so funny you say that because there's so many tech CEOs who always tell me their Everest stories. And by the 50th one, I was like, and they were trying to relate Everest to life. I said, there's nothing relatable about going up a mountain you shouldn't be up and telling me what it means to run a company. I said, so if you mention it one more time, I'm going to hit you. So it's like, I think you're stupid if you tell me the story.
I've been up Mount Kilimanjaro.
Most people are not. Well, good for you.
And it was dead boring. I would not recommend it.
Okay. So what of most people aren't going to Everest. So of these tanning, Dr. Oz today said everybody should have a drink or two.
Alcohol. So alcohol is one of these complex issues because not too long ago we were all told red wine, it's the French paradox. You drink red wine, you'll live forever. False. Increasingly, the data are pretty clear. From a physical standpoint, what it does for the body, it's bad. There are 7 cancers associated with it: esophageal cancer, breast cancer. Not a good thing. It's also associated, obviously, with liver problems and cirrhosis. It also disrupts your sleep cycle. So if you drink wine at dinner, you might go to sleep. You might be sleepy, go to sleep, but then it disrupts the cycle, so you don't get full night's sleep. You don't get deep rest.
So why did the government today recommend more drinking?
I don't know. So increasingly you've got like the WHO, you've got various officials saying 0 is the safest. But look, there's birds like fermented fruit with alcohol. Monkeys like fermented fruit with alcohol. People have been drinking forever. It does a lot of things. People get relaxed. They talk to other people. They like the taste. Plus, we know that 65 to 70% of the American population, I won't survey this group, drink. You're not taking 65% of the population who are drinking alcohol and going to 0. Just not happening. And actually, when the Surgeon General report came up under Vivek Murthy, I wrote him and I said, I think it's a little too extreme. I don't think people are going to tune that report out when you say 0. So be responsible. What's responsible? Okay. Here are the no's. No binge drinking, right? No drinking alone, and no drinking to drown out your sorrows. Here's the positives. Use it to facilitate social interaction with other people. Drinking over dinner. Or, I was in Chicago. I went out with my brother and my wife to a jazz club, and Ram was regaling us with stories about this is where Al Capone was. And by the way, the, passageways where he got away from the cops when they raided the joint, there are 4 and they go to different theaters and blah, blah, blah. That's first of all, it's interesting. And second of all, facilitated by alcohol. And then we had great jazz. Right. That's the reason to do it. Right. And I think under those circumstances, you've got the positives of social interaction and, being with other people. And, that's a trade-off. But let's face it, we all know life is a trade-off. Right? You do some things which are
and you pay the price, right?
Yeah,
all right. Speaking of which,
there's a cost to some of them.
Obviously, the most controversial, and you work for NIH, vaccines.
I don't think that's controversial.
Well, I don't either.
I mean, there are some people in this town who don't like the data, but I have a table in the book where I talk about the mortality of vaccine preventable diseases, and when you look at the mortality of all these diseases, they're undetectable. We don't even, there's no mortality for many of them, and one of the problems I think is that we have gotten to a situation where the vaccines have made so much of childhood safe that people now have become, why give my kid vaccine? It's so safe out there. Yeah, the reason it's safe is because there are vaccines, right? Parents and our grandparents, right, in the 50s were nervous every summer because their kids might get polio. They might, end up paralyzed. They might end up in an iron lung. When I was at the Dana-Farber in Boston, and they exiled me to this outbuilding across the parking lot, a little brick building. Mm-hmm. I was doing something they didn't think was all that important, like bioethics. Anyway, they put me there, and I was on the second floor. And then one day I walked downstairs, and I walked into the basement. All these iron lungs lined up. There's a storage of iron lungs. This was like 1995. And it was like, these were all the iron lungs for the polio patients from Boston Children's Hospital, which was the other way across the parking lot. And once you see them, you realize, it was really bad. And once that vaccine, the Salk vaccine and then the Sabin vaccine became available, parents were lining up their kids. They couldn't get their kids vaccinated fast enough.
Right.
Because,
so where are we now then?
Well, the vaccine situation is most concerning about little kids because, we're getting rid of the hepatitis B vaccine right around, but, there are going to be some kids who get liver failure, get hepatitis B, have liver failure, and are going to die from it. Unquestionably the case. Last year, 288 kids died because of flu. We're going to have probably more this year because the flu season is even worse. Rotavirus, diarrhea, same thing. It's a terrible thing. Vaccines have made our lives so much better, and the data are uncontrovertible that they're safe. Every medical procedure has some risks, right? Just taking blood has some risk. You might get infected. You might. There are some risks to vaccines. We have a compensation system for that. And by the way, you want to know how frequently that compensation system is used? For every 1 million people who get a vaccine, one gets a claim. Now, I don't know anything in life where the chances of, getting harmed are less than 1 in 1 million. It's pretty obvious that this is a very good thing for all of us.
Agreed. So rule number 2, talk to people, as you noted just a second ago. Maybe not drinking as much, including strangers. We're living at a time when young people are habituated to living on the phone. So are adults, let's be clear, that talking to a stranger feels rude. College students say that trying to start a conversation with a fellow student that's sitting next to them before class starts, for example, would be weird. Many of them are scared of being rejected. Talk about this social awkwardness and how to get over it. There's more substantive ways to do it. I, for example, walk behind people in San Francisco who are looking at when I'm ever there, and I go, look up, and someday you're going to hear of me murdered in the streets of San Francisco. And I have to tell you, every person looks up and goes, "Ugh, I'm such an idiot." Like, they do not blame me for being extraordinarily rude. They feel like they're in the grips of this. But young people in particular, the isolation, there's been a movement across the world, including in this country more, of isolating kids from both social media and phones themselves. I think the problem is adults 25 to 45, myself. But talk a little bit about that, the meeting of people and what the phone environment does to that.
Well, So last year, in the fall of 2024, I banned all phones from my classroom. I also banned computers and taking notes by computers from my classroom. And two remarkable things happened. One was I came in and the classroom was a lot louder when I walked into the room. People were actually talking to each other. And it was pretty amazing. They, began to be before they were just looking at their phone. And the second is I actually got way better evaluations. And the reason isn't because I was doing anything different. The reason is they were paying attention. And makes all the difference. Every time you talk to a professor who's banned phones in their classroom, suddenly the classrooms get way better because people are not on the phone. They're not worrying about what's on the phone. They're actually worrying about what is the
Talk
professor
about
saying.
Socialization, because it does feel social in some ways, right? Of course, these things feel social, but talk about the importance of socialization for living longevity. It's very clear that we're in a problematic situation right now.
Absolutely. So people will say, well, look, I can connect with my friends, who are living in Australia or living in California via the phone. 100% true. The problem is you made those friends face to face. You did not make them over the phone, over social media. You can continue the conversation once it's made. Now, the data on making friends and interacting, very, very interesting. So many of you will know the Dunbar number. This is an English anthropologist at Oxford, and he looked at the brains of various animals, including people, and it's like, we can have about 150 friends. That's all our brain can handle. Now, most of them are acquaintances. They're casual. You might have them over for dinner. You would recognize them. You'd have coffee with them. But 5 or so of them are 5 to 10 are close friends who you're very intimate with. Many of them are, family. Many of them are people you got to know in college where you were talking deeply at midnight and with them. And then we have about 15 or 20 more who are people we have over to dinner, we see regularly, we talk to about once a month. And those are really important for our psychology. So if you look at the data, people who have more close friends versus people who have 1 or 2 or 0. Increasingly, we have a huge number of people. About 20% of the population now have 0 to 1 close friends. That's it. It's very, very clear that the more close friends you have, right, the longer you live. As a matter of fact, the difference between people who are lonely and have fewer social connections and people who don't is increase the mortality rate if you have fewer social friends between 22 and 33%.
And I just recently, for this series, interviewed Sherry Turkle about the increase in the chatbot relationships. And she said it was an outlier. She's at MIT. It was an outlier before, and now it's regular that people are consulting their chatbot date. Google just settled with the parents. I've done a lot on the kids that are committing suicide with these relationships. And in general, these chatbot relationships
they're no substitute. They're no substitute. So, look, my father was an extreme extrovert. I relate in the book. We used to take road trips. He loved driving, and we would take road trips we lived in Chicago, and go out west to Montana and Wyoming and Colorado. And every time we stopped in a diner, right, he would start talking to the next table. Or if there was no next table, he'd talk to the waitress. And he would ask them all sorts of questions like, why are you here? How did you come here? What do you do here? All those kind of questions. And he didn't do it like that, this is an FBI interrogation. I want to know name, rank, and seal. He would, he's just curious. And he was endlessly curious. He did the same thing in parks. Now, his kids, right, we were always embarrassed by this. He's off again, Can we crawl under the table? But it turned out people loved it. And I learned from him several really important things. First of all, initiate the conversation. The other person probably wants to talk and is embarrassed or shy. We're all like that. I'm still like that. But initiate. Ask the other people questions, and they'll talk about themselves. And what happens if you get rejected? Happens all the time, right? Nothing will happen to you. There's no big issue, right? Absolutely nothing. So I have a practice here. all of you, you're Washingtonians, you know, right? All the cab drivers, the Uber drivers, they're from Ethiopia, right? So I get into a cab, you recognize people that they're from Ethiopia, but I ask them, where are you from? And they tell me Ethiopia. I said, you know, I've been to Ethiopia 5 times. Suddenly they light up. They love it, right? Someone's been to their country. And so they asked me, where have I been? And I said, well, you know, I've been to Gundar and I hiked mountains there. I've been to Addis Ababa. I've been to Lalibela to see the churches carved out of the rock. And then I say, so where are you from? And they tell me, I said, how much family do you still have back there? And we're in a conversation already. And it makes their day and it makes my day. And this is one message from my dad, right? I'm being virtuous, right? Not only am I having a good conversation, right? I'm having them have a good social interaction. It's good for their health, too.
Especially these ones that aren't friends, like that they're actually, the health benefits are rather like just speaking to people you don't know.
Totally.
Is really interesting. Now, you also, another way to stay sharp mentally, because a lot of it is about mental sharpness. Explain the difference between crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence and how people can maintain what you want is fluid intelligence.
Yeah. So crystallized intelligence is all you crossword puzzle people who know all these words, or your Scrabble people. You got crystallized intelligence. You know a lot of words, and they're going to stay with you for a long time. I was just talking to 85-year-old wife of my former dissertation my dissertation advisor for my PhD, who unfortunately passed away, and she said to me that she has, you know, gone back to playing ping pong. And I was curious, well, is ping pong kind of like bicycling that, you know, you never forget it? You know how to ride a bicycle as a kid. You don't ride it for a long time. You get back on the bicycle, you know how to ride it. She says, absolutely yes. And my serve is killer, right? So, you know, that's crystallized intelligence, knowing the muscle movement or knowing, you know, your old telephone number, your old home address, where an event happened a long time ago. Crystallized intelligence, the last thing to leave. Fluid intelligence, on the other hand, is, you know, being able to keep something in your head and concentrate on something else, come back to remember it. It's decision making or fixing a pattern that you see or solving puzzles. That is fluid intelligence. And it's really important in new circumstances that you haven't seen before to bring all your information back together.
So doing new things. And this is the reason I have honey here is this is Zeke's honey. This guy's a famous scientist, but he decided to make honey. And by the way, it is the most delicious honey you've ever seen. But he learned how to
$20 for you after this.
Okay. He learned to make honey because it was hard for him, right?
Yes.
Anything that's hard, whether it's you learn to make chocolate.
Correct.
He and I, in the video, he made me put on colonial garb and march. I had never marched in a colonial parade and never will again. As a Minuteman, which was fun. It was actually fun and interesting. So doing things different,
yes,
like, is fluid.
It's part of fluid intelligence. Yeah.
Right.
And it, you know, declines beginning in the late 30s, early 40s. Our fluid intelligence declines. And it's the thing that is really, really important, that allows us to be creative, allows us to continue with
anything that's, it can be physical, mental.
Exactly.
Anything.
Totally. And there are things you can do to keep it going. And the first thing is, you know, get a lot of education. Turns out raising your baseline, really, really important. And this movement that really university professor has me shuddering is, you know, university's not worth it. Well, it may not be worth it to you from a money standpoint, but it's worth it to you from a brain standpoint. Why is that? Well, getting a lot of education makes more neural connections. Bringing together, you know, learning Dostoevsky and connecting him to other writers, other messages, right? Really, really important. Because once you start high, the decline seems to be pretty similar for people. And you start from a higher baseline. And so
it could be anything. It doesn't have to be Dostoevsky.
No,
learning how to do a carburetor, right? Okay.
It could be a fantastic trumpet player, whatever. Right. And then as you grow, trying new things, trying to establish those connections, and trying to do things that challenge your mind and force you to make new connections.
Well beyond crossword puzzles and things like that. Yeah, well, just whatever it has. Something that's
crossword puzzles are probably the same thing. They're relying on the same store of knowledge.
Rather than like.
Yeah, I was talking to Walter Isaacson the other day, and he was interviewing me, and he said that he's been learning French for the last 4 years because he's writing a book about Marie Curie.
He is.
And
he's moved on to better people, dead ones.
And then he's learning French so that he can report on her. And then he spent a lot of time. No, you don't do these things passively or like transiently. I mean, not passively, transiently. You've got to actually stick to it to make those connections. But those are what keep your brain young. Now, one of my big heroes who appears in this book several times is Ben Franklin. He is the model of this. He was endlessly curious about everything, always thinking. And, what is he famous for? If I ask you, you'll say bifocals, right? Almost everyone, that's the immediate
I was not going to say that at all.
Oh, what were you going to say? The lightning rod? Or
drinking.
Oh, conservation of electricity. No, he was not a big drinker, not a big drinker.
I'm teasing you.
And when did he invent the bifocals? He was 79 years old. Yeah, wow. And he had 2 more inventions after that. He invented them just before he left France to come back to the United States the last time. And then he built an addition to his house, a massive library for his 4,000 books, so he could stay curious looking at books. And he had to get the books high up on the shelf. So he's the guy who invented that arm. Do you have any of those, Brad? That gets the books from high shelves. And then he invented a chair where you fold down the seat, and there are steps there so you can climb up 3 or 4 steps to get a high book.
Well, that's
all of this after 79.
Because he had neural connections. Go ahead.
Yeah,
all right.
He had plasticity in his brain like no one
Brain
else.
plasticity is a word a lot of neuroscientists use. I played a lot of games. We did a lot of games, which poker and different things like that. My wife and I took a mahjong lesson just recently. It's the trend thing, so everybody get on it in 2026. The next chapter should be everyone's favorite. It's titled Eat Your Ice Cream, which is the title of the book. In it, you give advice on food that mirrors, in some cases, the newly inverted food pyramid that was published by the FDA under RFK. Sometimes a broken clock is right. There may be a surprise for some people. Tell us why you should eat our ice cream, but he does not think, well, maybe he does because of whole milk, but compare and contrast your advice on food and RFK Jr.'s.
So I would say I was, there are positives in yesterday's announcement, okay? And I was very pleasantly surprised. The positives are mostly on the what not to do. Don't eat so much ultra-processed foods. 58% of the American caloric intake is ultra-processed foods. It's horrid. Don't drink sodas. Cut down on your sugar. All of that's in his recommendations. It's also the top couple of Zeke Emanuel's recommendations. He's also against packaged cakes and cookies and things like that. All of that I agree with. Okay. He doesn't emphasize fermented foods, which is my big, the positive thing to do. Eat fermented foods, good for the microbiome. In the case of, probably the thing I push the most in the book, if I had to, with no financial conflicts of interest, by the way, yogurt, good dairy associated with a drop in type 2 diabetes, great for the microbiome because it's fermented. Kefir is the same. Kimchi, sauerkraut, really, really good. The thing I vehemently disagree with in that book is they're pushing more red meat. We know we've got tons of studies about red meat, high in saturated fats, heavily associated with cancer, heart disease, stroke, diabetes. We could go down the list. There's a much longer list. You like that? I like it every so often, maybe once every 2 months, I'll have some red meat. I like a hamburger too. Not way too much emphasis on that. Don't use seed oils, use beef tallow. Wrong. Seed oils are actually quite good. Canola, sunflower oils. The best oil, if you want, is olive oil. It's very expensive these days, but so there are many good things.
Beef tallow is a no.
Yeah, definite no.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's the recommendation. Now, of course, I deal with a lot of other things. If there's one other big positive thing you have to do that Americans are terrible at, fiber. more than 90% of Americans do not eat enough fiber every day. We don't eat fruits and vegetables, which is main source, or nuts, main source of fiber. And that is bad because the fiber is basically the prebiotic. So we spend a lot of money on those stupid prebiotics. Just eat your fruits and vegetables.
Right.
Really
and
crazy.
the surprising one, avocados.
Yes, avocados.
Huge. One avocado will give you almost all the fiber.
That's right. Absolutely. So my big breakfast recommendation is a bowl of berries, some granola with oats in them, yogurt and kefir on there, and throw in some hemp hearts for additional protein. Nothing could be better.
All right. Last chapter is on sleeping well. I don't sleep a lot.
None of us do.
But I wear this, and I now am very much tracking it. This is the Oura Ring.
Does it help?
I have to say, I used to call all of them unwearables because
Yes.
they're called wearables. But this one actually gives me some interesting information, especially around sleep.
More information than, say, getting up and feeling good?
Yes. No, you're right. Correct, you are. But it's just interesting to me. And we're doing this thing, so I wanted to find out. But I did interview a bunch of sleep experts. And of course, you don't quite need as much sleep as they say two at the same. Like, it's more like 7 hours. It's the time that you wind down.
Yeah.
Sleeping on having a cold room. And so there's some typical things. But talk about sleep, because there's a lot of people who don't sleep a lot. High achievers, Martha Stewart, Tom Ford, Bill Clinton, and I hate to say it, Donald Trump doesn't sleep very much.
Wait. You talked about high achievers.
All right. Okay. No,
Okay.
I said he's achieved a lot.
So let me first talk about the wearables, because I am in general against the wearables, and especially for sleep. I should note very carefully, in my household, I'm the minority opinion. My wife, who has a PhD from MIT, very quantitative. She loves the numbers. It really motivates her. Now, if the numbers motivate you, good. But I've never understood the wearables, especially for sleep. Sleep, you get up in the morning, you feel like shit. You know you didn't have a good night's sleep. You feel good. You know you had a good night's sleep. I don't need a little, Oura Ring to tell me that. And that's what I told the CEO of Oura. I was giving a talk somewhere, and he was sitting right next to me. And I said, I think that thing you're selling is like, anyway.
Did you Larry Davided him? You Larry Dave, you went,
Anyway, I don't quite understand that. But sleep is a huge problem, mainly because of what you said, is that we have this sort of, Protestant worth ethic in America, and we think, less sleep is better. I had my debate partner when I was, 15 years old. He had this idea, I'm wasting a third of my life sleeping. No, sleeping is really important for you. How do we know that? Because we do sleep. Sleep is really, just think about it, really dangerous. You're knocked out for 8 hours. You are the most vulnerable you could possibly be to, the cheetah next door, right? And yet it's preserved. It must be important, right? Nothing would have been conserved through evolution like that made you so vulnerable, unless it were really, really important. It
also cleans out your brain.
Very important to clean out your brain.
REM sleep.
It also allows you to restore your muscles and lots of other things. It moves the memories from short-term memory to long-term memory. That the short-term memories have campus long-term. That's why I'm pointing to. This is a biology lesson, and including everything else. Anyway, really, really important. And we do a terrible job because we think less is better. No, less is not better, and we have to change our attitude. Now, we Americans like quick fixes, so we reach for the pills. Terrible idea. They don't work. And this isn't Zeke Emanuel talking. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine is like negative on all of them. You go to like the Cleveland Clinic webpage, you go to Mayo Clinic, they all say the same thing. The only thing proven to work besides setting the bed is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which is to figure out what's going on. So
there are some new classes of drugs that they're looking at, correct?
Yeah. I would not. Kara, you can invest. I would be skeptical.
I'm not investing. So very last, and then we're going to get to questions in a second, but exercise. And then I have two newsy questions.
Exercise. The answer is yes. You got to do all the kinds of exercise. There are 3 kinds of exercise. Aerobic, right, for your heart, lungs, vasculature, reduces cardiac problems and stroke risk and things like that. You got to get your heart rate up. Strength training, really important. So you're not, the fragility is, you're not fragile, and really, really important. And then balance and flexibility, yoga. So, I start my day, my wife and I start our day, 20 minutes of yoga in the morning, followed by about 5 minutes of core exercise, and then we go off and
So
have
it's not
that
a
bowl
lot.
of
You don't have
yogurt.
to do a lot, like
Well,
obsessive.
that's the yoga. I ride a bike in the winter.
You do.
3-4 times, the inside bike 3 or 4 times a week for 20 minutes. Just 20 minutes, get it in, and
I'm
you can
saying
fit 20 minutes into any day.
Obsessive exercise is proven not to be that much beneficial unless you like it, correct?
Yeah, right. So one of the interesting things is we all have 75 minutes a week of vigorous exercise, 150 weeks of moderate exercise. And if you push that up, you do more and more, there's a plateau and you don't get any more. And then you just increase your risk of getting repetitive motion injury, tennis elbow, whatever, problems with your knees, doesn't decrease your mortality at all. And the other problem I find is, just think about it. 10 hours a week, what is the opportunity cost there? What aren't you doing in that time that you could be doing? Now, sometimes there's a good excuse. When I'm writing, I usually come to some problem. I can't say it right. I don't know exactly what I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I go out for a run, and I think about it, and it usually solves my problem.
Yeah.
But there is a plateau, and I think we don't recognize that enough. Don't overdo it because you're either wasting time or you're risking serious injury.
Right. And don't tell everyone about your exercise routine because it's exhausting. We're going to end very quickly on some newsy questions. The CDC recently dropped childhood vaccine recommendations for 6 diseases. Seems schmucky to me. But the CDC said we're now more in line with other developed nations that recommend fewer vaccines and have similar, better outcomes. Where do you come down on the schedule? Look at your face.
Wrong.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I mean, Denmark, just think about Denmark, right?
Well,
a country of 6 million.
Denmark does not want us to think about them right now.
That is very true. A country of 6 million people, universal health care coverage, where when you go to the point of service, you go to get care, copay 0, right? And they've got nurses that pay attention to kids to make sure they get all their vaccines. They actually are doing well, and they actually follow a little more paternalistic, you might say, than America. That contrast, right? They're down at 11. By the way, they're the outlier. They are very short on the vaccine. That is a bad mistake. And I can tell you the most difficult, or the worst thing about it is the call I got from my 3 daughters, right? Which is, Dad, what should we do about vaccines for the kids? Right now, they have, a doctor they can consult, but most people don't have that. I said, you just tell your pediatrician you want the old vaccine schedule and no screwing around. Okay. But I think it's going to sow a lot of uncertainty,
your own
fear,
daughters,
and we've already seen this. The vaccination rate, not just for MMR, but for diphtheria and tetanus, is down. 65% of the counties in the United States now have the herd immunity level, which is 95% for MMR. They're below the herd immunity level. We're going to see lots of outbreaks, lots of kids hospitalized, and lots of deaths. That is not a good thing for the next generation. The wrong direction.
Wrong direction. Okay. Last question. Republicans in Congress have refused to authorize the Affordable Care Act subsidies, but now they did tonight. They voted. They went against Trump and the others. Yeah, but Congress,
it didn't pass.
It hadn't passed, but it passed in
the
House
of Representatives.
It might pass in the Senate. You were instrumental in creating the ACA. If you could go back to those negotiations, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently to make the law harder to undermine?
How long do you have, Kara? So let me, it's a complicated story. One of the things, look, the Affordable Care Act has been a tremendous success. 25 million people or so got health insurance, and we know that giving people health insurance actually decreases their mortality. We actually plateaued on healthcare costs as a percent of GDP for 15 years, unprecedented in American history. I unfortunately can't say that our quality has gone up, and I also can't say that our satisfaction has gone up in that time. One of the problems, the biggest problem, is you put in place a bill, and there was no mechanism to make moderate changes without going back to Congress. No company would put in a strategic plan, operationalize it, and then not re-examine it for 15 years. You just wouldn't do it. And that's basically what we did with the Affordable Care Act. There are many modifications that need to happen and couldn't happen because of the political polarization. Republicans just uninterested in trying to make it better. There are many things to make it better. If I had to go back, there are two big changes, sort of themes of changes that I would make. I'm not going to talk about the particular details except for one. We made healthcare more complicated. We added the exchanges and we added a bunch of stuff that made healthcare more complicated. I think one of our mantras going forth has to be simplification. We have to simplify things, not make them more complicated. We have to mean, all right, either you get insurance through your employer or you get insurance. Everyone else gets insurance this other way, which I think ought to be a small exchange. Only 6 plans on it. Reduce the number so that people can make rational choices. The other thing we needed to do was to make much more standardization of medical treatments, standardization of electronic health records. So, you go to 2 different hospitals, you can actually get them moved back and forth. Standardization in what we pay. There's no price for anything in healthcare. There are a million prices for, you go to the hospital, there's a Medicare price, there's a Medicaid price, and then every private insurance company and individual plans in those companies has a different price. It's nonsense. It's one of the reasons we have so much, it's so costly, and we have so much administrative costs. 20% of all healthcare spending is administration. And one of the reasons is we haven't standardized things. So simplification and standardization is where I would go. Now, my plan, okay, I'm running. My plan is, we need to do something about affordability now. Right now, when insured people are afraid to go to the doctor or to the emergency room, you have a serious problem. When deductibles are $5,000 and most people can't afford that, serious problem. So we have to do things, and everyone has to be taxed. Hospitals, insurance companies, drug companies, all have to suffer something to get the costs down. But that's not comprehensive reform. We have to move to more comprehensive reform and get a plan. And the problem is, and just as much a problem for us liberals who've been working on healthcare, we haven't got a lot of plans out there. And there's a lot of depression among, I think, most health policy people. It's like, we're not going to get anything, so why think about anything? No, we have to work now. And I like to remind people, Medicare was first proposed 1957. Enacted 1965. You have to develop an idea, vet an idea, socialize it with people. And healthcare is particularly hard because no one knows how the hell it works. It's just so complicated. Yeah. And so it takes a lot of time to socialize people, and you have to talk to them. My first action, by the way, on the road to affordability is cap deductibles and out-of-pocket payment. They should be no higher than $1,700, which is 2% of the median income of American households. And that should be it. That's what they do in Germany. That's what civilized countries do.
Okay. If your brother runs for president and wins, we'll see. If he made you HHS thing, what's the first thing you would do? You say, buy RFK and your beef tallow, move along.
What's the first thing I would do? That's a really good question. There's so much that needs to be done there. I don't know. Actually, you've got me stumped. I think this issue of healthcare reform, and the reason I keep coming back to it is fixing the healthcare system, is because we're spending $5 trillion a year. The American healthcare system is the 3rd largest economy in the world. Right? Only the United States and China are bigger. Our healthcare system is bigger than Japan, bigger than Germany's total economy. So why would I focus on? we need to take money out of that system so we can do two things. One is spend it on other things, education, fixing our grid, lots of priorities in America. The second thing we have to do is give some of that money back to families. If we took the American healthcare spending from 17.5% of GDP down to 15% of GDP, 2.5% drop, that's $3,000 per family. Just imagine what most Americans could do with $3,000 extra dollars. I now know what my very first action. Thank you for
All right. I can't
giving
wait
me time to bullshit, filibuster while I was thinking.
All right. Okay.
All right.
Excellent.
My very first,
go ahead.
My very first thing is I would mandate through Medicaid that all newborns, right, get nurse-family partnerships so they have early childhood interventions for the first 2 years of life. If there's any higher return for a dollar spent, right? It's the highest return for the government spending a dollar. It's university economists estimate between $7 return or to $15 return, because what we do early on is the most important thing for brain development, for socialization, for all sorts of things. So you got to work with parents. You got to make sure kids have a strong, healthy start. That would be my first thing.
Because that's what it takes to live long.
It's an investment in the future. Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Well, the book is called Eat Your Ice Cream. And by the way, there's ice cream all around this area. 6 simple rules for a long and healthy life. What is your favorite ice cream?
I've got 2 favorite ice cream places in Washington, D.C. Dolcezza, where Rob Duncan is a very dear friend and makes special ice cream for me, the chocolate hazelnut, and trying to get him to make a Lebna honey pistachio ice cream, just heavenly. And Happy Ice Cream has a wonderful chocolate as well, and I eat them all.
All right. On that note, Zeke Emanuel, everyone, thank you so much.
Today's show was produced by Christian Castro-Russell, Michelle Alloy, Megan Burney, and Kaylin Lynch. Nishat Kurwa is Vox Media's executive producer of podcasts. Special thanks to Rosemarie Ho. And our theme music is by Trackademics. Thanks again to Politics and Prose for hosting this event. If you're already following the show, you're eating ice cream. If not, you're drowning in beef tallow. Thanks for watching. See you on Thursday.